Now, are there good people at the legislature? You bet there are. Of course, there's fantastic employees, there's fantastic people in elected office, but it doesn't take very many bad ones before you create a situation where you have what Alan and I would describe as a corrupt organization, and facilitated in part, never mind all the other things, they themselves are contributors to the facilitation of corruption. They make it easy because of their behavior. And somebody needs to say, stop it, get out of the building, get out of office. And thank God a few of them were walked off the property in the last election by taxpayers. We're reminded that, we were only able to ultimately get attention to the wrongdoing by Gary Lenz in his job as the de facto police chief of the Ledge, by having an outsider come in and ultimately find him guilty under the Police Act of an egregious breach of trust. One would have thought, given what we were concerned about in the first place, that it wouldn't have had to go that far before somebody said, hey, this individual doesn't belong here. Also reminded of the request we had for an investigation by the Auditor General. I can only describe that as a complete gong show. We asked for an audit. We ultimately got an audit which was a whitewash. It didn't come to any conclusions that held anyone accountable. And people should know that was a sloppy investigation to the extent that ultimately the police laid charges relating to fraud. That should have been very obvious to an Auditor General. I'm also reminded of the McLaughlin investigation, again an outside investigation, and unfortunately people who were testifying to McLaughlin, numerous of them lied their faces off about what was going on there. But in any case, that did result in confirming some of the suspicions and concerns we had about Craig James. Unfortunately, once again, there was relatively no accountability. At the end of the day, following McLaughlin, he's allowed to resign, and in that resignation signed an agreement with the legislature which basically said he doesn't have to pay the money back that McLaughlin said he took inappropriately, and secondly, that none of us are ever allowed to say a bad word about the guy.
Do you think that the press gallery maybe didn't take a step back and realize who was in the speaker's chair? Someone with a criminology degree, someone who is not your average politician.
Yeah, well, they obviously didn't get the memo that I spent my career as a criminologist, that's for starters, and they didn't take into account Alan's background as well. But I think the other thing that was surprising is the reliance over and over again on what certain politicians had to say. And in every single case, not once did those politicians have anything to back up their statements. I'm reminded again of Andrew Wilkinson, the former leader of the BC Liberals, who said, this is nonsense, stop this nonsense. And then, of course, one has to ask, well, on what basis did he have for saying that? Nobody went to him and said, look, well, what do you mean by that? Nobody followed up. Nobody followed up on the concerns we had of whistleblowers, where it was pretty clear there was wrongdoing. It was just pretty clear to anyone looking at this objectively, and in every single case they ignored it.
Alan, what did you learn over the last 3 years especially? There is, of course, the phenomenon a lot of chiefs of staff and aides to politicians eventually take the next step into the political realm themselves. Is that something after these 3 years that you'd consider?
I'll never say never to any profession or opportunity. I think, along with Darryl, I've had the opportunity to serve British Columbians in a very different way. But what I've learned is, I get party politics. I've been around party politics for a long time. I get it. I understand, the opposition and the government, the governing party, etc. What I was really surprised at was sort of the link between the press gallery and the members. To me, what I saw was not sort of an independent press gallery. Like, my expectation coming in, sort of off the street, was that, you know, you better be careful what you do or say here, because, you know, they will just report it as they see it. Not even close. Not even close, Bob. With the exception of, you know, a couple such as yourself. What I saw was a total and utter manipulation of almost every story. You know, when Craig James and Gary Lenz were walked off the property in 2018, and I get it, the media has to report on something, but you could just report on what you see. But no, Darryl Plecas and Mullen became the story, and boy, were we a big story, and not in a good way. You know, we spent the 2 months following that on a daily basis being dragged through the mud, and not only professionally, but very personally. To me, that is not the role of media, to attack people personally. You want to come after him and say he's a terrible speaker, or come after me and say I'm a terrible chief of staff, you know what, fill your boots. But when you start attacking people personally, that's not okay. And when you choose then to, you know, go down the road of a story that suits a politician or a specific political party, instead of just reporting the facts and the truth, that's problematic for me as a British Columbian. This is a real issue for me, and I look back over the last 3 years and I'm thinking, like, how is that even possible? You know, you can report it in this way, or in the way that benefits somebody. The reporting should benefit nobody. The reporting should benefit the viewer and the average British Columbian, so they can know what's going on. So I learned that really, really quickly. Also, what I learned was, I thought privilege, I understand the concept of privilege being to protect our politicians when they're in the chamber doing the business of the people. So if they say something or they call somebody out, they are protected by privilege. Well, there's a lot of folks at the BC Legislature that seem to think that the privilege extends to all sorts of things and all sorts of people. Well, I would challenge that on a constitutional basis, because in my opinion, and I know a lot of people's opinions, that's just not the case. But we see people sort of getting away with some pretty strange things and then claiming privilege, can't talk about it, go away. And we've seen that over and over and over again. To me, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that a politician can stand up and make something up about an elected official, i.e. Darryl, or you know, a staff member, just literally make something up and then say, no, it's privilege, I don't want to talk about it. No, you should talk about it. So that's really crazy to me. And then I look around the legislature in the last 3 years and I think, there's a lot of people that shouldn't be here. This is the people's house. And I'm not even talking about elected officials, I'm talking about, you know, staff members, and pretty high level staff members that, in my opinion, and I think Mr. Plecas would agree with me, should not be there.
But there's lots that's been going on, you know, that's police related. And of course we can't talk about those things. And so, you know, it might have been an easier ride if we could have just blurted out every single thing we knew. It would have been an easier ride if we could have blurted out everything we knew, that even we knew it wasn't going to be criminal. But you can't be bringing forward every single concern, because you still have a job to do. And I can tell you many times when incidents happen which deserve public attention, we just had to say to ourselves, we're not going to drop that bomb today, because, you know, we're still dealing with the fallout of other bombs. But if people knew the whole story, I think it would be a very different thinking in the minds of many. And unfortunately, you know, to this day, we're still waiting for that collection of people at the legislature, the press gallery, just to come out with a single story which says, you know, this is what happens, or this deserves attention. At very least, one would have thought, a journalist would say, you know what, this doesn't look right. I think somebody should investigate, which is all we were saying from the beginning. We were never saying somebody is guilty of one thing or another. We were saying there's a prima facie case for believing, there's reasonable and probable grounds to believe that something's wrong here and it deserves attention. And if it turns out that the person is found to be not responsible, well, good for them.
3 years is what you spent as Speaker before the snap election was called, and the title of your final report says it all, unfinished business. There is still much work to do that you do hope is carried on by those, especially Raj Chauhan, who's now in the Speaker's chair. But in that 3 years, what did you learn about yourselves, and what did you learn about government and what is supposed to be the democratic process?
Well, you know, I say jokingly, but I'm only half joking. I was reminded very early on when I got into politics of the series House of Cards. And I joke, like, whoever wrote the script for House of Cards had to have been from British Columbia. The only difference is I haven't seen him kill anybody yet. But I would say that, you know, so many people in the public distrust politicians. And from what I've experienced, you know, seeing it firsthand on the ground, I absolutely understand why. One thing I didn't understand before I got into politics was the power of party politics, party for the party. Like you'll do anything for the party, and you know, ethics and integrity takes a back seat. We saw that. At the time, we called attention to the need to secure data at the legislature. And almost the entire Liberal caucus stood up in the House and read script about something, number one, they do nothing about, and secondly, was an absolute lie and fabrication of the facts. Yet they spewed it out. And part of the thing that goes with politics, you spew it out anyway. I was also disappointed to see the number of times where people hid behind privilege, where they'd say something in the House, knowing full well that they can't be sued. If they said it outside, they could be, but they can't be if they say it in the House. That kind of thing. It caused me to say, at the end of the day, people get elected to public office, not because people know them, it's because they don't know them. Because if people knew some of these people, like the kind of people that they really are, they wouldn't elect them for anything. So that was a disappointment. Again, the biggest disappointment is, and it's reflected by the structures in place, again, not being FOIable. What is so special about the legislature that we can't be FOIable? What is so special about the legislature that we can't have the same merit systems they have in place in other parts of government? Why does it all have to be so different? Of course, there may be things which are necessarily privileged, but for the most part, the system needs to be turned on its head. So whilst we proposed, you know, a great number of changes that should happen at the legislature, there's certain things in the basic structure that are ultimately important. Like, I think the need to follow the UK example and have a speaker who's independent. There also needs to be, again, following the UK and other jurisdictions where the clerk's responsibilities are separated from the other administrative responsibilities of the leg. These are pretty basic kinds of things, and I say to people, well, you know, well, why don't you even look at it? What's incredible about the legislature is not even being able to get them to look at it. And the other important thing that needs to happen, and Alan could speak to this more than I because he had so much involvement with whistleblowers, but we passed numerous policies for better oversight, transparency, and accountability. But to this day, as we're talking to you, we still don't have a policy on whistleblowers. Well, the government has one. Other jurisdictions have this. What is so special about us that we can't do that? And I'd say the other thing that people could start doing is saying, well, what kind of mechanisms can we have that make it easier for whistleblowers to come forth? non-disclosure agreements are the enemy of whistleblowers, because they tie people down from being able to say anything about what they really know is going on. So I think that, that, and, just a whole series of other things. But at the end of the day, overall, it really emphasizes, and I'm sure Mr. Mullen would say this, it emphasizes how incredibly important it is for people who work at the Ledge, or for people who are elected to office, to have a strong moral compass. Because it doesn't have to be a rule for you to know what's the right thing to do. Just because there's a policy, or we don't have a policy, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And you would think people would have learned that at a very early age, but apparently not. I mean, the first order of business, even after the charges against Craig James were approved, was deflect, 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 deflect. Mr. Mullen's concern about the mace, once again, the first order of business was deflect, deflect, deflect. Spin the story in a manner so people believe there's nothing going on here, move on to something else. It's absolutely disgraceful.
I was reminded, in fact, just this morning that, look, it's been sort of a week and a half since you left the place, and I'm still sort of going, and so it's hard to kind of settle down. It's hard to kind of take a deep breath and just sort of relax, because I think Mr. Plecas agrees with me when I say there was very little relaxing. 18, 20-hour days, and I genuinely mean that. And when we turn a corner and think, oh, we're getting it done, we're almost there, then another roadblock, and another roadblock, and another roadblock, and most people would have just said, you know what, I'm out of here, I'm folding my tent, this is crazy. But we never gave up, and I'm so thankful we didn't give up. So yeah, I'm unwinding, but I'm not done yet, and I know Mr. Plecas is not done yet when it comes to the whistleblowers.
Yeah.
We have 24 plus people still sitting there going, excuse me, what about me? And I've spoken to a lot of them as recent as yesterday that have said, like, is that it? Are we done here? These people need to be made whole. As was just referenced, these people are not in a good place. A lot of them have had serious health concerns because of this, serious mental health issues because of the way they were treated, and yeah, some suicidal thoughts. Like, this is crazy. So I'm not prepared just to let that go and say, well, I'm out of there now, so it's all good. No, it's not all good. No, it's not all good. Those people need to be made whole. That's number one. Number two, that is the people's house. That place should be a glass house. We need transparency. I've been screaming it from the rooftops. Mr. Plecas has been screaming it from the rooftops. And my question is, why aren't the people in that building screaming it from the rooftops? And how do we get there? Well, we get there by just this. Be transparent, be open, be honest. So I'm not giving up on that. I know Mr. Plecas isn't either. What's next? Well, look, I don't know. We'll see. We've got a lot more to do on this. We've got the unfinished business report. We've got the ongoing active police investigation, so we'll see where that lands. But I've got a very good feeling that there's going to be opportunities here in the new year for Mr. Plecas and I, whether separately or together, to help people, to continue on, because I think what everybody knows and realizes now is this. We are not into corruption. We will never be into corruption. Nobody should be into corruption. So anytime we get an opportunity to look at, investigate, or help weed out corruption, we're going to take that.
My guess is that almost every single British Columbian cares about corruption. They want good government. They don't want corrupt government, and they want their government to take care of people. They want them to be helpful to them. And most of all, a government should say, you know what, we're first in line to undo a wrong. We're first in line to make sure that somebody gets justice. And somebody needs to say to those people in that building in Victoria, do it. Start making sure that people get justice, and start doing things, and we're not talking stuff which is hard to do. They can do this in a nanosecond. The whole response to the coronavirus should tell us that when governments want to do something, need to do something, they can do it in a nanosecond. They need to do that now.